Cain kills his brother. God curses him for it. And the very next thing out of Cain's mouth is, "Whoever finds me will kill me." Found by who? According to the same chapter, there were only 4 people alive on the entire planet. Cain, his mother, his father, and the brother he just murdered. Then, a few verses later, Cain leaves, gets married, has a son, and builds a city. A city, not a tent, not a hut. A structure that needs walls, labor, planning, and a population big enough to actually live in it once it's finished. So where did all these people come from? Who was Cain afraid of? Who did he marry? Who handed him the stones? Genesis never explains any of it, and this isn't a modern skeptic's gotcha question dreamed up to embarrass believers. Rabbis and theologians have been quietly wrestling with this exact contradiction for over 2,000 years, long before anyone had a reason to be cynical about Scripture. Today we're walking through every real answer anyone has ever seriously proposed, including one that got so dangerous it briefly reshaped how the Western world thought about race itself. Let's lay out exactly what the text says, because the problem is real, and it's sitting right there in Genesis chapter 4. Adam and Eve have 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel out of jealousy after God favors Abel's offering over his own. God confronts him, curses him to wander the earth as a fugitive, and Cain immediately panics, saying anyone who finds him will kill him for it. God actually agrees this is a real danger and marks him to prevent it. Then Genesis 4 verse 17 says Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. Read that again slowly. A wife, appearing with 0 introduction, 0 backstory, as if the reader should already know who she is. A city requiring architects, laborers, and a population large enough to actually populate it once it's standing. All while, as far as the narrative has told us so far, there are exactly 3 humans left alive on the entire planet: Adam, Eve, and Cain himself. Before we even get to the population problem, there's a smaller mystery hiding in the same verse. Genesis says Cain settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. For centuries, people have searched maps and ancient trade routes, trying to pin down where Nod actually was. Here's what most translations don't tell you. In Hebrew, Nod isn't really a place name at all. It comes directly from the Hebrew word for wandering, the same root used 2 verses earlier when God curses Cain to be a fugitive and a wanderer, Navanad, on the earth. So, the land of Nod essentially translates to the land of wandering. It's a wordplay, not a coordinate on any map, ancient or modern, and no serious archaeologist has ever claimed to locate it. Genesis may not be pointing you toward a place at all. It might be describing Cain's condition, a man with no fixed home, drifting through unclaimed country east of everything familiar. That single detail already tells you this text is doing something more literary and deliberate than a simple travel log, which should make you a little more suspicious about what else it might be doing on purpose. Now to the real question, where did Cain's wife and Cain's workforce come from? There are 3 serious answers, and they lead in very different directions. The first and the oldest is simple. Cain married his own sister. Genesis 5 verse 4 says Adam lived 800 years after the birth of his 3rd son, Seth, and had other sons and daughters. The text just doesn't bother naming most of them because ancient genealogies almost never tracked daughters, only the male line that mattered for inheritance. The Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text written around the 2nd century before Christ, actually fills that gap directly. It names Cain's wife as Awan, described plainly as his own twin sister, and says Seth married his twin sister too, a woman named Azura. Under this reading, there's no real mystery hiding in the text at all. Adam and Eve simply had children Genesis never bothered to name individually, and in a world with exactly one family on earth, close family marriage wasn't a moral problem yet, let alone a genetic one. Those laws don't show up until Moses, more than 2,000 years later, once the human gene pool had grown large enough for the risks to actually matter. The second answer deals with time, not people. Genesis never tells you how many years passed between Abel's murder and Cain building his city. Adam and Eve lived, according to the text, for 930 years. That's not a typo. That's the actual number in Genesis 5. If Cain and his siblings were having children of their own for 100 years, 200 years, even longer before that city gets built, you're not looking at 3 people anymore. You're looking at a small clan, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, entirely capable of raising walls and filling a town named after Cain's own son. Some scholars even point out that the original Hebrew verb for built in that verse carries an ongoing sense, closer to was building than built and finished. That would suggest a project that stretched on for years, maybe even one that outlived Cain himself and got completed by later generations. Not something 4 people knocked out over a single summer. Under this reading, the first city wasn't a shock. It was simply the natural outcome of centuries nobody bothered to narrate in detail. Because Genesis is famously more interested in who did what than in exactly how long it took them to do it. The third answer is the one that gets uncomfortable fast. What if there were people on earth who weren't descended from Adam at all? In 1655, a French theologian named Isaac La Peyrère published a book arguing exactly that. He claimed the Bible only tells the history of the Jewish people and that other humans, what he called pre-Adamites, already existed on earth before Adam was created. He pointed to Cain's fear of being killed and his wife appearing out of nowhere as evidence baked directly into the text. The book landed like a bomb in 17th-century Europe. It was formally banned by church authorities, publicly burned in multiple cities, and La Peyrère himself was arrested and eventually forced to recant his own work to avoid execution. But the idea didn't die with the burning. Over the following 2 centuries, pre-Adamite theory got picked up and twisted by people looking to justify something far uglier than a Bible puzzle. The idea that different human populations had entirely separate origins and could therefore be ranked against each other biologically. That distorted version of the theory became one of the intellectual roots of 19th-century scientific racism, a movement called polygenism, and it was used in both Europe and America to defend slavery and colonial expansion. It's worth being direct about that. Whatever you think about the original question Cain's story raises, the version of pre-Adamism that got weaponized for racial hierarchy has been thoroughly discredited, both historically and scientifically. Modern genetics has confirmed, repeatedly and conclusively, that every human population on Earth shares the same deep ancestry, with no biological basis whatsoever for treating any group as separately or lesser descended. What La Peyrère actually raised was a legitimate textual observation. What later generations did with it is a genuinely dark chapter, a reminder that even a fair question can get hijacked by people looking for an excuse to justify cruelty they'd already decided on. So set that dark detour aside, because Jewish tradition had already been sitting with a version of this question for over 1,000 years before La Peyrère ever picked up a pen. Genesis Rabbah, a collection of rabbinic commentary compiled around the 5th century, contains a striking teaching on exactly this kind of gap. Before making our world, the rabbis taught, God made and destroyed other worlds first, testing different versions of creation, and only settled on this one when it finally pleased him. It's not a literal claim that other humans were walking around outside Eden, waiting to help Cain lay bricks. It's closer to a way of holding the mystery open on purpose, of admitting the text has gaps that even the ancient rabbis, the people who took this book most seriously, weren't afraid to sit with rather than paper over with a tidy explanation. If the sages who compiled Jewish law were comfortable saying we don't fully know, that's worth remembering the next time someone tells you the Bible has to be read as airtight or not at all. More recently, a computational biologist named Joshua Swamidass proposed something that tries to bridge the ancient question with modern genetics entirely in a book called The Genealogical Adam and Eve. His argument separates two things most people assume are identical: genetic ancestry and genealogical ancestry. Population genetics is clear that humanity did not descend from just two people. Genetically speaking, no serious scientist disputes that. But genealogical ancestry works completely differently, and mathematically, a single couple living just a few thousand years ago could still become the ancestors of literally everyone alive today, simply by their descendants marrying outward into a wider population that already existed beyond the garden. Under that model, Adam and Eve could be real, recent and central to your own family tree, while other humans existed alongside them the entire time, unrelated by blood, but fully human. That single distinction would make Cain's wife, and the hands that helped him build, considerably less mysterious, without requiring anyone to rewrite Genesis or ignore modern science to get there. Here's where we land. And it's genuinely not a simple one. Maybe Cain married a sister the text never bothered to name. Maybe centuries passed silently between two verses, long enough for an entire clan to grow. Maybe the ancient rabbis were onto something when they left room for worlds and questions we were never meant to fully resolve. Or maybe Genesis is quietly gesturing at something far stranger than any single family tree. We're not going to pick one for you. This is one of those places where the text simply doesn't hand you the ending, and every explanation, old or new, from a 2,000-year-old apocryphal book to a modern genetics paper, is ultimately an educated guess dressed up as an answer. That doesn't make the question pointless. If anything, it makes it worth taking seriously enough to actually sit with, instead of skipping past it the way most translations quietly do. So now it's your turn. Which explanation makes the most sense to you? The sister nobody named, the centuries that quietly passed, or something Genesis never fully spells out? Tell us your theory in the comments. We genuinely want to see where you land on this one. And if questions like this are exactly why you're here, hit subscribe, because we're not done digging.